Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be a new book recommendation video, and it's going to be centered around one of my favorite premises or setting, which is magical schools. I am stretching the definition a little bit with some of these, but I wanted to add all of the ones that I can remember that have at least, a mention or a little portion of the plot around a magical school, because if you like that premise, you will take everything, right, that you can find. So this is where I'm at right now. I will be talking about the best ones that I've read, the worst ones, and like the in-betweens quickly. It's mostly like a list with like a small description of the plot or my thoughts, just to let you know. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you won't, so I'll explain my issues with them so you can, decide for yourself if that's something that's going to be a problem or not. So let's get to these. I do have quite a few. I decided to skip authors that are problematic just because I don't really feel comfortable supporting them. Feel free to, look them up. Why does it sound like I said lick? Look them up. The Name of the Wind by Rothfuss obviously has to be on this list. The first book is definitely centered around magical school. Book 2 I'm currently reading, so the first portion is also there, but I don't think it's going to stay there the whole time. Book 3 eventually, hopefully, will come out, but it works for this video. The magic system is really entertaining. I overall enjoyed this book more than expected, to be honest. I went into it with pretty low expectations. And so far, I feel like whatever I've heard people complain about, like the main character being a little and the female character not being great, I've been seeing it as the author, the narrator, judging his younger self because he's retelling his life story. But we'll see how I feel at the end of book 2. But yes, so far so good. Do recommend it. Definitely works with this video. But that one is really famous, so let's talk about something a bit more underrated. The Sword of Kaigen. I have been mentioning it a lot this year because I've read it earlier this year, and it's one of the best books that I've read. I loved it. It is an adult fantasy, but standalone, which there aren't enough of those. It's very character-driven, though. But there is a magical school, technically 2 actually. You follow this woman who, when she was younger, went to an international school where she learned to fight and a bit of magic. And then she married into a very, very traditional family, which do own a magical school in a small town or village, really. And you're following her flashbacks and then her current life as she is raising her sons there. And it's one of the best characters arcs that I've ever read. I do recommend pushing through a little bit. The beginning is a bit slower. It was originally self-published, and it's probably why it's so underrated, but it is fantastic. I adored it. To see her struggle to find her place there, and seeing them under attack as they are more traditional and the rest of the empire has kind of modernized a little bit, and it's fantastic. I don't want to say more because, again, character driven, but it's amazing. Do read it. Let's talk about the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. The first book being The Fifth Season. This is such a unique adult fantasy series. I devoured it. But it takes a little while to get used to it because of the writing style. A lot of it is told the second person, so you. So it gets a little confusing, so it won't be for everyone. With that said, you follow this woman who lives in a small town, and one day she comes back home. Her husband killed her son and kidnapped her daughter, well, their daughter. So the story doesn't really center the magical school, but there's still one present, and there's a little bit of time spent there. So if you really love magical school, I feel like we'll take anything. So this still works. The magic system is super interesting. Also, one thing that I love with this one is that it mixes some of my favorite thing, which is like the magic and the fantasy, but also kind of apocalyptic world setting, and the mix is just really well done. I really enjoyed it. There's also great representation. The characters are just fantastic, and I can't recommend this enough. Like, the ending was just fantastic. I had to mention the Poppy War trilogy because even though the magical school is mainly in the first portion, like the first half of the first book, it still works. You follow the main character who, in order to escape her horrible childhood, attempts to make it to the school where she will learn to become a general in the war. I do want to mention to look up trigger warnings because pretty much everything I can think of is in this book, which makes sense because of the war, but it's still definitely up there. It is an adult fantasy, so definitely tends to be a little bit darker, but it works kinda with this video. Still recommend it. The magic system is super interesting. This one is more based on gods, and the gods are not like good. And using your magical power will just drive you crazy. So, fantastic story. Do recommend it. I did finish the whole trilogy, and obviously no spoilers, but finally an ending that is good. I feel like I've read so many trilogy where I get to the end and I'm just disappointed. Not with this one. I'm still thinking about it. It was great. Everyone has been talking about the Grisha universe because of the new TV show, but I had to mention Shadow and Bone because it does have a magical school. You don't see it a lot in the TV show, but in the first book, you do have a good portion where everything happens in the magical school. You learn how the magic works, which is why you have to read the first trilogy to understand Six of Crows. Everyone is always debating that. I disagree. You have to read at least the first book. Anyway, so it works for this video also. The Rithmatist by Brent and Sanderson, which obviously magical school. This one, the thing is that you're following a main character who isn't technically part of the magical school. He just wishes he had magic. And there's been like murder on the campus and he's trying to figure out what happened. The magic system is super interesting. People are basically like drawing like circles and then like little lines and soldiers to like attack each other, which sounds really weird, but it was not bad. I just wish it was an adult book. That's the best way of describing it. I feel like it's supposed to be YA or middle grade. The main character is 16, but he acts like he's 10, which was, and the romance is YA romance kind of sucked, to be honest, but because it's Brent Sanderson, the story and the magic is really interesting, and again, magical school setting. The next one is more of a special mention than anything because the magical school is a small portion of the story, but I still think it was worth mentioning, and I've only read the first book, so maybe it will be more important the rest of the series. But Jade City, which is the first book in the Greenbone saga by Fonda. As far as the plot, think Godfather with magic, kung fu, and just two clans trying to fight for control over this city. And it was just really, really great. A lot more character driven than I expected. I think it's because the characters are definitely super attaching and you're really rooting for some of them and their struggle as they try to survive. And yes, I've only read the first book. I'm planning on reading book 2 any minute now, and the third book is coming out towards the end of the year, so you can binge read the whole thing. But yes, highly recommend this series also. A few that I was more so-so about, or like stretching a little bit the definition of magical school. The first one would have to be Every Heart a Doorway, which like magical school might be stretching a little bit. You're following kids that went to magical universe through doors, think Narnia, and then when they come back, they struggle to adapt, so they go to this specific place and they learn about these places, but I feel like it might be a bit stretching it, but still, if you like more middle grade YA, you would probably enjoy the series. I also wanted to talk about Assassin's Apprentice, which I was dying to read this series. I thought I was going to absolutely love it, and I found myself pretty disappointed. I read the whole trilogy, like I tried, but I couldn't really get that invested into all of it. It's very character driven. There is a magical school setting, I guess, like the main character is learning to become an assassin, but meh, but still. You also have The Magicians, which I've only read the first book. I need to continue. A lot of people were describing this as like an adult depressed Harry Potter, which I guess. I do think the magical school is interesting. The magic system seems interesting. I just feel like, yes, the main character is depressed, I guess, very negative, but it's more like towards the end, I feel like the story went like on a weird tangent, which we'll see how the rest of the trilogy works, but I thought I would mention that one. Also, Black Prism, which definitely has a magical school. And the magic system is really interesting. That one is based on color, like people that can see more color can use more powers. I did enjoy that part of the story. I also enjoy like the kind of mystery that happens. I'm going to keep it vague. But my issue was that I went into it thinking I was going to love it, give it 5 stars, and then nobody had mentioned how sexist it was. So I have yet to continue this series because of that, but I do have book 2 and even 3 on my shelf. So eventually I'll give them a shot. But yes, if you don't have an issue with pretty sexist humor and like the fact that sex slaves are totally normal. And then the ones that I really didn't care for, we have A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I was super excited because that one really happens in a magical school. You found this person that goes there and is learning very different kind of magics, but the main character is really unlikable, which I don't necessarily have an issue with that as long as there are other things you can care about, but you don't get a lot about the magic, you don't get a lot about the school except that it's very dangerous and like you have to be on your toes 24/7, which is kind of exhausting to read, to be honest. And I didn't care about anything and I just finished it for the sake of it, and unfortunately it really didn't work for me, but you might feel differently. Magic for Liars was definitely one of my biggest disappointment. Was it last year? You found a story, if I remember correctly, you have like sister twins and one of them goes to this magical school and now they're adults, and then there's been a murder there and the other sister that doesn't have magic goes there to investigate what happened, but it was a huge flop for me. But magical school, investigation, murder, weird circumstances. So that one mentions Harry Potter a few times, which like why are people talking about Harry Potter in a universe that there are magical school? It's just a bit weird. Anyway, last but not least, this is going to be the controversial one. Are you ready? A Wizard at Earthsea. I couldn't get into it. I will blame it on the French. I tried to read it a couple years ago, and I couldn't get into it. I don't know if it's because, I don't know why, but I couldn't get into it. But it is a more classic YA fantasy series with magical school. So you might like it. Okay, this is going to sound strange, but I'm adding these two because there's no magical school in the first book. There will be apparently in the rest of the series. I just haven't continued. Bear with me. Like Nevermoor, I feel like if you think middle grade magical school, this one is going to be recommended a lot. And I went into it thinking, yay, magical school. No, there's none in the first book. None. So be warned. But apparently you do get some later on. Confirm in the comment section if you have read this series. I feel like it's recommended a lot. But yes, I'm not planning on continuing. And also recently I read Magician's Guild, which there is like mention of the magical school, but apparently you get to see that more in the rest of the series. I just haven't had a chance to continue yet. So, and also Night House, don't listen to people. I've seen it on lists of magical school. I really disagree. No. So university setting, they're like secret society with magic, but it's not a magical school. I don't think it counts. And like the only reason to read that book is Darlington. The rest sucked in my opinion. I feel like this recommendation video was a little weird because it's a bit all over the place, but I love that premise. I just feel like I'm still looking for my holy grail, you know, the best one that I've ever read kind of thing. So this is your turn. Let me in the comment section, what are the best magical schools that you've read about, any that you would recommend to everyone, me included. Also let me know if you have read any of the ones that I have mentioned in this video because I want to know your thoughts. Everyone can actually read them if you feel differently or the same. And that's going to be it. Thumbs up, subscribe. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out. And I will see you in my coming video very soon. Bye.